My daughter hadn't spoken to me in 15 years. Not a call, not a letter, until the day she discovered I'd won $36 million. That morning, she showed up at my new villa with her husband, their luggage, and his parents in tow. "We're here for our share," she said boldly. "We'll need our own rooms." I smiled, calm, cold, because for the first time in my life, I was about to do what I should have done long ago. And by the time I was finished, they would wish they'd never come. The camera flashes were blinding. Hot, relentless bursts of white light. As I stood inside the Florida Lottery headquarters in Tallahassee, clutching an oversized check worth $36 million, reporters shouted questions like hungry gulls, microphones thrust toward me. My cheeks ached from smiling. "Wilbert, you're the luckiest man in Florida." The lottery official boomed into the mic. "What's the first thing you'll buy?" I adjusted my grip on the absurdly large cardboard check, the thing almost as tall as I was. "Nothing extravagant," I said. "I've lived simply for 67 years. That won't change now." A young reporter in the third row raised her hand. "Do you have family to share your winnings with?" The question hit harder than I expected. I held the same polite smile, but inside, something twisted. "I have what I need," I answered. The truth was simpler, colder. I had a daughter. Past tense. Silence for 15 years makes you a stranger, not family. The press conference dragged on another 20 minutes. They asked about my plans, my old job, my retirement from 4 decades in logistics, moving valuable cargo, managing risks, preventing theft. Every word I said became public record. My face, my name, my win, splashed across every news outlet in Florida. By law, lottery winners couldn't hide. I felt exposed, like a shipment left unguarded on a dark loading dock. 3 days later, the money landed in my account. After federal and state taxes took their bite, $21 million sat in my checking balance. $21 million. The number didn't even feel real. That night, I stared at the glowing digits on my laptop screen. My reflection looked back at me, small, uncertain, dwarfed by all those zeros. For 40 years, I'd been the man who protected value, tracking shipments, anticipating risks, safeguarding millions in product. But now the cargo wasn't cargo anymore. It was me. The next morning, I walked into First National Bank and asked for their top financial advisor. A man in a tailored suit, the kind that probably cost more than my old car, welcomed me into his office. He congratulated me, smiled too wide, and then his tone sharpened. "With this kind of wealth, Mr. Bailey, you'll need to guard yourself from opportunists. Family claims can be—" I cut him off. "I understand risk assessment. Let's talk about trusts." His eyebrows flicked upward. Then we got to work. For 2 hours, we built my defenses. Layers of accounts, trusts, investment vehicles. I took notes methodically, just as I had for years on warehouse floors. Route the money, shield it, protect the cargo. 2 weeks later, I paid cash, $1.2 million for a villa in the Orlando suburbs. The realtor kept gushing about luck. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a man fortifying a fortress he'd live in alone. Moving day came with steady December rain. My few boxes looked pitiful in rooms meant for families. I unpacked carefully, almost clinically. Dishes stacked by size, books lined alphabetically, shirts spaced evenly in the closet. The silence filled every corner. I'd once imagined retirement differently. Grandkids running through halls, family dinners, laughter echoing off these walls. But that dream died 15 years ago. That evening, I stood on the back porch watching the sun sink behind an unfamiliar skyline. The villa cost more than I'd earned in a lifetime, yet it felt hollow. I scrolled through my old contacts from the logistics firm, men I'd known for decades. I could have called one, invited someone over. But what would I say? Come admire my money. Witness my loneliness. Lula had stopped calling long ago. I'd long stopped expecting her to. My daughter existed somewhere beyond my reach, living a life that no longer had space for me. 3 days after moving in, I saw my own face again, this time on the evening news. Orlando retiree wins $36 million jackpot, the anchor announced cheerfully. There I was, frozen on screen, gripping that ridiculous check. My name, my age, my story. Everywhere. My address wasn't public, but it didn't need to be. The wolves would find the scent. I turned off the television and went back to unpacking, quietly, methodically, the way I'd done my entire life. The study still looked unfinished. New shelves waited against the wall, boxes of logistics manuals and efficiency guides stacked nearby, relics of a life built on systems and precision. I spent the afternoon restoring order, lining up the remnants of my career like old soldiers: control, structure, predictability. That was my language. The doorbell rang at 4:30. I froze, a book suspended mid-air. I hadn't ordered anything. I hadn't invited anyone. The only people who knew this address were my lawyer and the bank. I stepped quietly to the front window and peered through the blinds. An unfamiliar sedan sat in the driveway, luggage strapped to its roof like a declaration of permanence. Two silhouettes stood on the porch, half hidden by the overhang. My pulse spiked. 40 years of protecting valuable cargo had taught me one thing. Unannounced visitors after a windfall weren't visitors. They were liabilities. I leaned closer, angling for a clearer view, and my breath caught. Through the thin slit of glass, I saw a face I hadn't seen in 15 years. My hand froze on the doorknob. The face belonged to a memory I'd buried deep. I forced myself to inhale, count to 3, then open the door. Lula stood there, 38 now. The years hadn't softened her. They'd sharpened her edges, given her the cold composure of someone who'd learned to weaponize charm. Behind her stood Neil, her husband, the same man from the old photographs. Their luggage crowded the doorway like they'd already decided to stay. "Hi, Dad." "Surprise," she said with forced brightness. "We thought you could use some company now that you're rich." That word, Dad, struck like a slap. 15 years since I'd heard it. The last time she'd hurled it like an insult. Neil stepped forward, arms crossed, grin carefully calibrated. "Family should stick together, especially when there's this kind of money involved. We're here to help you manage things." I said nothing. Just stood there, the door half open, watching their performance. "We saw you on TV," Lula continued, voice bubbling with artificial pride. "We're so proud of you. 36 million, that's incredible. We brought our things. We figured we'd stay a while, help you settle in. You'll need our rooms ready tonight. Not a suggestion. A command." They'd already written the script. 15 years collapsed in my mind. The smell of that cramped old apartment. Lula, at 23, standing in the living room with Neil lurking just behind her. "We need 50,000. Dad," she'd said back then, her tone half plea, half demand, "for the wedding. And Neil's investment. It's a sure thing." I'd shown her the open checkbook, every cent I'd managed to save from my modest salary. "It's all I have, 10,000. Take it for your wedding. With my blessing." Her expression had twisted in disgust. 10,000? That's pathetic. Neil's business needs 50. You're a warehouse manager making 60 grand a year. You've never achieved anything. "It's everything I've got," I'd said quietly. She'd flung the checkbook across the room. Pages scattered like torn pride. "Then you're even more pathetic than I thought." Neil's hand on her shoulder, silent, approving. The door slammed. 15 years of silence followed. "Dad?" Her voice yanked me back to the present. Lula waved a hand in front of my face, all sweetness and steel. "Are you listening? We need to get settled." Neil had already picked up a suitcase and stepped into the foyer without invitation. "You'll get exactly what you deserve," I said evenly. "Give me some time to think about arrangements." They mistook my calm for compliance. Lula's smile brightened. Neil's eyes swept across the villa, quietly assessing value. He paused at the television, the leather sofa, the kitchen fixtures, his mind tallying assets like inventory. "This place could use upgrades," Lula said, pushing open doors. "The furniture's cheap. We'll need to redo the guest rooms." "This one's ours," she declared, pointing at the largest. Then she gestured toward the next. "Neil needs an office for his business calls." I followed them, fists clenched behind my back. Show nothing. Reveal nothing. Evaluate. We should set up power of attorney, Lula said lightly. You're not getting any younger, Dad. Someone should help you make decisions about your finances. I spent 40 years managing distribution, I said, every syllable deliberate. I know how to allocate resources, Neil smirked. Look, Wilbert, family takes care of family. You've got millions now, and Lula's your only daughter. We just want to make sure everything's handled fairly. We've got some great ideas for investments. I'll think about what's fair, I interrupted. Give me time. They took my words as permission. Soon, I heard drawers opening, suitcases unzipping, their voices drifting through the walls. He looks older, Neil muttered. Frailer, Lula replied. He'll listen to reason. He always does. They hadn't come for me. They'd come for the money. I walked to my study, closed the door, locked it, and leaned against the wood. My heart hammered steady and cold. Then I crossed to my desk, opened my laptop, and typed, Estate Planning Attorney, Orlando, Florida. The first result gleamed with 5 stars. Robert Chen, expert in estate law and asset protection. I dialed immediately. Chen Law Offices. The receptionist answered smoothly. I need a consultation on inheritance and asset protection. Tomorrow morning, if possible. It's urgent. One moment. Mr. Chen has a 9 a.m. opening. Does that work? I'll be there. I hung up, pulled a fresh notebook from my desk drawer, and wrote across the first page in bold letters, Asset Protection Strategy. Outside the door, their voices continued, discussing new furniture, business ventures, ways to persuade me to hand over control of my accounts. I began writing. Years of logistics training guided my pen. Track the assets, identify the threats, establish countermeasures. Different kind of cargo, same principles. They thought I owed them something. But they'd walked away when I had nothing left to give except love. Now they were back because I had everything they could take. My pen moved faster. Names, dates, memories, every insult, every betrayal. A detailed map of what came next. I'd spent a lifetime ensuring valuable cargo reached its rightful destination. Every shipment tracked, every risk anticipated. Now the cargo was my own, my money, my legacy, my dignity, and I would make sure it landed exactly where I intended. Through the walls, Lula's laugh drifted from the living room. Sharp, careless, grating, I repeated my promise under my breath. You'll get what you deserve. The next morning, I told them I had banking matters to handle. They barely looked up. Lula was measuring windows for curtains she expected me to pay for. Neil was scrolling through his phone, likely pricing upgrades. They didn't question me. They thought they'd already won. Robert Chen's office occupied the 10th floor of a slate-gray building in downtown Orlando. I arrived 15 minutes early. The waiting room smelled of leather and furniture polish. Every law book on the shelves stood perfectly aligned, their spines straight as soldiers. I liked the order of it. Chen greeted me precisely at 9. Mid-40s, wire-rimmed glasses, a handshake firm and professional. Mr. Bailey, he said, gesturing toward a mahogany chair opposite his desk. You mentioned inheritance planning on the phone. How can I help? I slid a handwritten list across the desk. My assets, written in block letters. He studied it, then nodded. Florida law is straightforward, he said, reaching for a thick leather-bound statute book. You have the absolute right to distribute your estate however you choose. Your daughter has no automatic claim. Even though she's my only child? Yes, he said. She can argue, but she won't win. Not after 15 years of no contact. The relief that washed through me was almost disorienting. She reappeared 3 days after I won the lottery, I said quietly. Chen's expression didn't shift, but his eyes did. A flicker of recognition. I've seen this before. We'll make it airtight. For the next hour, we built the framework of my defense. My instructions were clear. 60% to the Florida Veteran Support Fund. 40% to the Orange County Animal Shelter. Organizations that gave without expecting to take. Chen read the draft aloud. I explicitly disinherit my daughter. Lula Bailey, not due to any deficiency on her part, but because I choose to direct my assets toward causes I believe in. Why phrase it like that? I asked. It demonstrates mental clarity, he said. No spite, no confusion, just deliberate intent. It closes every legal door she might try to open. The first piece of my plan locked neatly into place. We signed the will. His assistant notarized it, sealed it, and placed it in the firm's vault. Ironclad. As I stood to leave, Chen handed me a card. If you need background information on your visitors, he said, Marcus Green, private investigator, former detective, thorough and discreet. That afternoon, I sat across from Marcus in a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from my villa. Early 50s, steady hands, eyes like a scanner. What do you need to know? He asked. Everything, I said. Finances, debts, employment, why they're really here. He nodded, jotting notes. 2 weeks, full report. Bank records if I can access them legally. Retainers, $3,000. I wrote the check. 10 days dragged like 10 months. In that time, Lula and Neil embedded themselves deeper into my home. I came back one evening to find the living room rearranged. The couch moved, the chairs rotated, my books scattered across new shelves they'd ordered without asking. We made a few improvements, Lula said, gesturing grandly. This place needs personality. I said nothing, just lifted my phone and quietly photographed every change. Evidence. The next morning, Neil cornered me in the kitchen. He carried his tablet like a weapon, a digital slideshow queued up and ready. I've got a business proposal for you, Wilbert. Food delivery with a twist. Imagine Uber Eats meets social media. Revolutionary. 200 grand gets us to launch. I'll cut you in for 10% equity. His tone was confident. His eyes, desperate. I spent 40 years in logistics, I said evenly. I know supply chains. Food delivery margins are razor thin. He forced a laugh. That's why this one's different. Timing is everything. Thinking too long means missing out. I'll consider it, I said, smiling faintly. He didn't like that. His jaw tightened. He left the kitchen muttering. That evening, my phone buzzed. Marcus. Coffee shop, tomorrow, 2 o'clock. I was there early. He arrived on time, wordless, and slid a manila folder across the table. Thick, heavy, sealed with truth. They're drowning, he said simply. You're the life raft. I opened the folder. Page after page of statements. 6 credit cards, all maxed. Total debt, $47,000. Personal loans, $28,000. Payments 2 months delinquent. Rent on their Tampa apartment, $1,800 a month, 3 months behind. Eviction notice filed for December. Neil's investment record filled 3 pages. A $10,000 loss in a cryptocurrency pyramid scheme last year. Failed business registrations. Unpaid vendor invoices. Their combined annual income, $52,000. Lula worked part-time in retail. Neil did commission sales. Mostly unsuccessful. I photographed every page, each statement methodically, like cataloging cargo. Marcus tapped the eviction notice with a blunt finger. This was filed before your win went public, he said. They had nowhere to go. Not a lost daughter returning home, a debtor hunting a bailout. I paid Marcus, thanked him, and drove back to the villa. That evening, Lula found me in the study. Dad, I hate to ask, she said, a practiced casualness in her voice. We have some unexpected expenses. Could you spot us $5,000 just until next month? I met her eyes. Money moves fast, I told her. I need to budget carefully. This has to last me 20, maybe 30 years. Her irritation flared for a second before the smile smoothed over. $5,000 is nothing. I said, I'll think about it. She left with her jaw tight. Late that night, I sat in the locked study with Marcus's folder open. $85,000 in liabilities, eviction looming, failed ventures. They hadn't come to reconnect. They'd come because the ground had given out beneath them, and they expected me to be the safety net. I opened a new file on my computer and titled it Documentation Log. I began entering dates, conversations, demands, observations. Every ask, every slight, every moment they revealed their aim. Evidence collection had begun. 3 weeks went by. Mid-February warmed the air in Orlando and their behavior warmed into entitlement. The villa felt smaller as they spread into every room. I planned deliberately. On Friday, I cooked salmon, roasted vegetables, a good bottle of wine. I set the table, called them down, poured the wine, and lifted my glass. Family is everything, I said, voice steady and warm. I was wrong to let 15 years pass. Lula, I'm changing my will. You'll inherit 50% of my estate, but you must prove you've changed. Lula's face lit with a joy she barely contained. We have changed, she gushed. We want to be here, to help you, to be family again. Neil leaned in, oily with gratitude. You won't regret it, Wilbert. I set my glass down. Wills are permanent. Before I sign, the community needs to see you're worthy. 6 months of sustained charity work, consistent involvement. Public demonstration of character. Neil's expression soured. Lula shot him a sharp look. 6 months seems excessive, he muttered. It's perfectly reasonable, Lula said through a smile. Service is important, the trap closed. They'd taken the bait. Saturday morning, I drove them to the Orange County Animal Shelter. Sarah, the volunteer coordinator, mid-50s, practical, kindly, met us and showed them around. The scent of disinfectant and kibble, the rows of kennels, the rhythm of feeding and cleaning and walking animals. Lula's smile was practiced. She stepped gingerly around puddles and kept distance from barking dogs. Neil hovered with his hands in his pockets, offering comments but doing little. Sarah later confided to me, she seems uncomfortable around animals, and I covered it with, she's adjusting. Give her time. We volunteered 3 hours. Lula cleaned one kennel slowly, grimacing when she thought no one was looking. Neil offered suggestions that weren't helpful. I photographed them at intervals, proof of participation. In the car afterward, Neil exploded. This is nonsense. Cleaning up after dogs for a will that should be ours. Lula squeezed his arm. 10 million, Neil, 6 months. We can pretend. I kept driving, watching them in the rearview mirror. We shouldn't have to pretend, he muttered. He owes you. The following week, I arranged a veterans fundraiser. Hotel ballroom, 200 attendees, local press. Lula and Neil stood beside me, shaking hands and posing for photos. A reporter asked, Mr. Bailey, how does it feel having family back in your life? I performed warmth for the camera. It's a blessing. We lost years, but we're making up for it by giving back together. Nothing matters more than family and service. The story ran the next day. Lottery winner reunites with daughter, gives back to community. At home, the mask slipped. Through the vent, I heard them that night. How much longer do we have to keep doing this? Neil asked. 4.5 months, Lula answered. Then we're set. Just smile and pretend you care about homeless veterans and shelter dogs. The old man will sign anything. He's so desperate for family. I recorded the conversation. Florida's one-party consent law meant I could lawfully record in my own home. Another piece of evidence stored away. Over the next 2 weeks, I staged 3 more events. Each time, Lula and Neil performed for the cameras and donors. Each time, they complained privately afterward. At the food bank, Neil muttered about manual labor. At the literacy program, Lula checked her phone while children practiced reading. During a park cleanup, both vanished for an hour claiming bathroom breaks. Volunteers noticed. Comments filtered back to me. Your daughter seems distracted. The gentleman with you doesn't appear engaged. I saved every note, every photo, every overheard sentence. What looked like reunion on the outside was, for me, the most meticulous kind of reconnaissance. Gathering proof, pattern, motive. Are they really here to help? Or just for the headlines? I proclaimed their progress to the volunteers, smiled for the cameras, defended them in public. Behind closed doors, I catalogued every failure. Lula's grimace in the kennel, Neil's restless glances at donors, the bench photos of them scrolling while others worked. Late in the night, I replayed every clip on my phone: shelter footage, veterans gala screenshots, park cleanup photos, and saved each file into a folder labeled Evidence Collection. Then I opened a new document and titled it Phase 3, Escalation. Downstairs, Neil's impatience leaked through the floorboards. "How much longer do we have to keep doing this?" He demanded. 6 weeks of staged charity. 6 weeks of documented contempt. Perfect. One late March evening, after another food bank shift, Neil caught me in the kitchen while I rinsed a coffee cup. Lula hovered behind him, composed and coordinated, like a duo that had rehearsed intimidation. Neil stepped close, jabbed a finger at my chest. 6 weeks of charity work. We've jumped through every hoop. 100,000. Call it an advance on the inheritance. I set the cup down slowly and stayed still. Inheritance is a posthumous transfer. I'm alive. My money is mine. He sneered. Sitting on millions while family suffers. Some father you are. Lula perched on the counter, legs swinging, syruped sympathy in her voice. Dad, we've proven ourselves. We've volunteered, done everything you asked. Don't you trust us yet? Trust is earned over years, not weeks, I said, flat and factual. This is about financial responsibility. Her smile thinned. Financial responsibility? You won the lottery. That's hardly prudent planning. Neil's face darkened. Let's be honest. You were nobody before that ticket. A warehouse manager pushing boxes. You got lucky. You don't deserve this money any more than we do. The insults rolled out like something rehearsed. I'd heard versions of them before. I'd spent 4 decades saving carefully and living within my means. I offered what I could 15 years ago, I said. I'm offering what's fair now, and nothing more. Neil stormed out. The guest room door slammed hard enough to rattle frames on the wall. 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Diane Foster stood on my porch with a tin of homemade cookies. 62, kind eyes behind bifocals, a friend from the senior center. Thought I'd drop these by, she said, stepping in. She'd noticed my absence from the center. The house smelled of jasmine from a neighbor's hedge through the open window. We sat on the front porch with coffee. Conversation was thin until voices carried in from the kitchen. Neil to Lula. Your father is a selfish old man. After we get the inheritance, we're done with him. Lula's cold answer. 6 months. We can tolerate him for 6 months. Then we never have to see him again. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Shock spread over her face. She leaned in toward me. You heard that? She whispered. They're using you. You need to protect yourself. Cut them off. I pulled out my phone and opened the recorder. Florida's one-party consent law let me capture conversations in my own home. Diane's eyes widened. So you're building a case, she said. You've been planning this from the start. I smiled without pride. Planning and logistics were the tools I'd worn down over 40 years. Execution was what I knew. After Diane left, I set the phone in plain sight on the living room bookshelf between 2 books. Small, unobtrusive, angled toward the seating area. Years of warehouse optimization taught me where to place things efficiently. Light barely caught the glass. The device recorded. When Lula and Neil came back into the room, I kept my voice level. No advances, no loans. The will stands as promised. 50% after I'm gone, not before. Neil's laugh was thin and bitter. They thought they'd cornered me. I'd spent the last weeks quietly tightening every bolt. The listening device hummed softly on the shelf. Another silent witness tucked among the volumes that had once taught me how to move and protect value. After you're gone. The words hung there like a dare. Lula hastily softened her tone. Neil didn't mean that. We're just frustrated. I met Neil's eyes and let him have a statistic instead of a sermon. Lottery winners don't always thrive long-term. Stress, sudden change, the headlines. When will that inheritance actually kick in? He prodded. Neil means we hope you live forever, Dad, Lula supplied, her voice tilting higher. We're only planning for the future. I plan to live a long time, I said with a smile that meant nothing. Decades, hopefully. You might be waiting a while. Neil's jaw tightened and he left without another word. That night, headphones in, I replayed everything. Neil's taunts, nobody, selfish old man, Lula's private calculation, tolerate him for 6 months, then disappear, and the veiled suggestion about my death. I encrypted the files and sent them to Robert Chen with the subject line, additional evidence of character. March recordings. Each recorded syllable pulled another knot tighter on the noose they didn't realize they'd tied. At 6:30 a.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Mr. Bailey Patterson and Associates. We represent your daughter, Lula Bailey. She's retained us to pursue familial support obligations. I sat up in bed. They're requesting $5,000 a month under Florida Filial Responsibility statutes. Please send formal notice. They'd retained counsel, escalation as expected. I texted Chen. Opposing counsel made contact. Need meeting today. His reply came within minutes. 10 a.m., my office. I told Lula and Neil I had banking business. They barely noticed, too busy planning their legal theater over breakfast. Chen spread the Patterson letter across his desk. 3 pages of legal posturing. Weak case, he said immediately. Florida's filial laws exist but rarely apply. They'd have to prove a legal obligation to support an adult child. Can they win? I asked. No, he said, but they can make noise. Cost you time, legal fees. That's the strategy. Annoy you into settling. I shook my head. I'm not settling, Chen nodded. Then we prepare. I'll draft a response detailing your documented generosity 15 years ago, their subsequent abandonment, and the conditional charity requirement you imposed. We'll hold your recordings in reserve. Let them proceed. Every step they take will generate more evidence of bad faith. Midday, I returned to the villa. Lula and Neil waited in the living room. Their lawyer had clearly spoken to them. Lula rushed forward with tears primed. Dad, we hired an attorney because we're desperate. You won't help us and we have nowhere else. Is this what you want? Your daughter homeless? The old wound opened like a seam. The control I'd been stitching together frayed. You had somewhere to turn 15 years ago, I said, my voice thin with remembered hurt. You chose to walk away. You were 23. I gave what I could then. It wasn't enough. Nothing will be enough for you now. My words were precise on purpose. There was no room for sentiment. Neil advanced, aggressive. We're taking this to court. A judge will see a rich old man hoarding millions while his daughter suffers. We've consulted better attorneys than you. Your case is weak. His sneer was confident. When we win, we're coming for a lot more than $5,000 a month. My hands trembled faintly with controlled anger. I didn't abandon you, Lula. You abandoned me. You called me pathetic, worthless, then vanished for 15 years until I had something worth taking. I recited the day she threw the checkbook at me. Every insult, every slammed door. You won't rewrite history. Neil stepped closer, the body language of intimidation. We aren't leaving this house. Try to force us out, and it only strengthens our legal narrative. Heartless father evicting a struggling daughter. I let strategy reclaim me. Stay, I said. Every day you're here increases the evidence of your character. I'll document everything. Document what? Neil mocked. That we live in the family home while you threaten lawsuits? Yes, I said. Exactly that. Their exit slammed the front door behind them. I returned to my study, palms still shaky. The outburst had been necessary. Cathartic, but dangerous. I could not afford to lose my composure again. Late into the night, I studied the villa's floor plan, marking recording device placements in red. Kitchen, living room, hallway outside guest rooms, comprehensive coverage where voices rose loudest. In the recording, Lula's voice floated. This isn't working. He's not scared. Neil's reply, then we need something bigger. A public event where he can't hide. A reminder blinked on my computer. Orange County Veterans Gala, April 15th. Speech requested. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks while Lula and Neil schemed. I had my own timeline now. Back in Robert Chen's conference room, the table slowly disappeared beneath evidence. Photographs, recordings, Marcus Green's detective reports. We reviewed everything methodically, piece by piece, tightening the net they'd woven around themselves. The Veterans Gala would draw 300 people, Chen said, tapping the venue layout with a fingertip. Local press, prominent community leaders, the perfect stage for a reckoning. I flipped through his presentation on the laptop. Audio clips trimmed and cleaned, photos arranged in strict sequence, timeline graphics ready to guide the story. No commentary, no spin. Just their words and actions played back in plain view. If they sue for defamation or emotional distress, truth is our absolute defense, Chen said, meeting my eyes. You have receipts, timestamps, witnesses. Let them file. We'll have litigation ready to move the moment they do. I wanted everything public. Their own voices would be the evidence. 2 weeks before the gala, I found them in the living room holding formal invitations. Thick cardstock, gold embossing. I'm being honored at the Veterans Gala for my charitable contributions, I said, keeping my tone warm. Despite our problems, I want my daughter here when I announce my legacy plans. Lula's eyes narrowed. You're announcing the will in front of everyone? She asked. I'm announcing my long-term plans. Family should be present for significant moments. Neil brightened. We'll be there. Wouldn't miss it. They smiled like winners. The week before the event, I stood in the Ritz-Carlton ballroom with the AV tech, testing every clip and transition. We checked levels, adjusted speakers. Every playback had to be flawless. Neil's voice echoed from the test files. The old man is nothing without that lottery money. Perfect. May 15th arrived. The Ritz-Carlton Orlando. Grande Lakes Ballroom glittered under chandeliers. 300 guests in evening dress filled the room. Veterans advocates, donors, civic figures. News cameras lined the walls. Lula and Neil arrived formally. She in a borrowed blue gown and pearls, he in a rented tux. They made their way through the receiving line, smiling and accepting congratulations. He's announcing the will publicly, Neil murmured to Lula. We're about to become very respected heirs. Let him believe it, I thought. Dinner began. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, fine wine. The Veterans Organization president spoke about sacrifice. Then he introduced me. And now, Wilbert Bailey, whose generosity has transformed our programs. I took the podium. Lula and Neil sat in the front row, confidence nailed to their faces. Thank you for honoring me tonight, I began, fingers steady on the podium. I want to speak about sacrifice and what it truly means. The audience leaned in. I spoke of veterans service and the cost of commitment. Then I shifted the tone. My daughter Lula is here tonight. We were estranged for 15 years. She returned only when I won the lottery. I want to show you why. The screen behind me lit up. I clicked the remote. Neil's voice filled the ballroom, crisp through premium speakers. The old man is nothing without that lottery money. He's always been a failure. We just need to wait him out. Gasps moved like a current through the crowd. Lula's face went pale. Neil froze, fork suspended midair. I clicked again. Lula's voice, intimate, cold, filled the room. I'll tolerate him a few more months, then get the money and never see him again. Images flashed next. Lula grimacing at the animal shelter. Neil scrolling as a volunteer spoke. The timeline graphic showing the 3-day gap between the lottery broadcast and their arrival at my door. My voice over the presentation remained steady. 15 years ago they demanded $50,000. I offered $10,000, my entire savings. They called me pathetic and vanished until I had $21 million. The final slide on the screen was my will. Redacted but unmistakable. Florida Veteran Support, Orange County Animal Shelter, and the clause in plain text, I specifically disinherit my daughter, Lula Bailey. I said what I meant. These organizations serve those who sacrificed everything. My family sacrificed nothing. They appeared only when money did. My legacy would go to the deserving. Silence swallowed the room, then a ripple of shocked applause that grew into sustained, genuine ovation. A handful of veterans rose to their feet. Some even saluted. Lula stood suddenly furious. "How dare you? You liar!" she shouted. Neil lunged for the podium, but security in black suits intercepted him, guiding him toward the exit with professional restraint. "That's out of context," Lula screamed. "You recorded us illegally." My voice stayed steady, amplified by the microphone. Florida is a one-party consent state. These recordings are legal, and context doesn't change your words. An older veteran rose and addressed the room. "Sir, you honor us by ensuring your legacy supports those who served. Your family's betrayal makes your generosity even more meaningful." For the first time that night, something real broke through my reserve. I had my years of service. They had 3 days of performance. The choice, to me, was clear. Security escorted Lula and Neil out while cameras swarmed and reporters shouted. "This isn't over," Neil warned, his voice carrying. I remained behind the podium. "I didn't humiliate you," I answered evenly. "You humiliated yourselves." From the doorway, Lula howled, "We're family. You owe us." My final words were as calm as they were final. "I owed you love and support when you were children. I gave it. You owe me nothing now. I owe you nothing." The doors closed. Applause rose again, louder as the room steadied. 6 days later, the call came. Robert Chen sounded flat. They'd filed suit, defamation, emotional distress, elder exploitation. Everything we expected. "How bad?" I asked. "Weak," he said. Patterson and Associates asked for $5 million in damages. Judge Margaret Holloway was assigned. "She's fair," Chen added, "and she doesn't tolerate nonsense." 2 weeks later, I stood on the courthouse steps of Orange County on a humid June morning. Chen met me there. "Both hearings today," he said. "Eviction at 10, defamation preliminary at 2. Efficient scheduling." The eviction took 20 minutes. Lula and Neil had no lease, no rental agreement, no legal right to occupy the guest wing. Judge Holloway's gavel fell. 30 days to vacate. The defamation hearing drew a packed gallery. My gala presentation had gone viral. Patterson's counsel argued I'd publicly humiliated their clients. Chen placed authenticated recordings and photographs on the bench. When Patterson objected to the recordings, Chen answered calmly. "Florida is a one-party consent state." Mr. Bailey was party to the conversations. Judge Holloway listened through headphones, reviewed statements from Diane Foster and shelter volunteers, and set the record straight. "Your client's own words condemn them," she said. "Nothing Mr. Bailey presented appears false or misleading. Truth is an absolute defense." She dismissed the case with prejudice and noted Mr. Bailey could seek costs under Florida's anti-SLAPP provisions. Outside, reporters pressed forward. "How does it feel to have the court validate your actions?" they asked. I chose my reply with care. "I don't feel victorious," I said. "I feel finished." This needed to end. When asked if I would pursue damages against my daughter, I shook my head. No, she has nothing left to take. This was never about money. It was about truth. A few days later, I returned to the villa. The guest wing was empty. They'd taken their things and, according to Marcus Green's update, left the state, California, seeking a fresh start. Diane called that evening. "I saw the news," she said. "How does it feel?" I repeated what I'd told the reporters. "Finished." Diane's voice softened. "You protected yourself. You did what was necessary." Necessary. The word felt right. It wasn't satisfying. It was required. Diane nodded slowly. "How could you tell?" she asked. When I finalized the will, her tears stopped like someone flipping a switch. Grief doesn't work that way. Manipulation does. I gave her every chance. Multiple chances. 15 years ago, I offered what I could. This year, I offered a path to rebuild trust through service. Tonight, I'd have accepted real accountability. She chose performance. Diane reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "The Senior Center is organizing a fundraiser for the Veterans Program you support," she said, smiling. "They want to create the Bailey Veteran Scholarship in your name." I shifted in my seat. "I don't need my name on anything," I said. "It's not about me. It's about what your actions inspired," Diane replied. "You donated $250,000 to their programs." "That matters." My phone buzzed. Jerry from the retirement community invited me to the weekly poker game on Wednesday. I accepted and made a note. A second call followed. Sarah from the animal shelter thanking me for the donation that funded their new medical wing. "Would you attend the ribbon cutting next month?" she asked. I agreed. After the calls, Diane watched me with that knowing look. "What?" I asked. "You're building something?" Diane asked, swirling her wine by way of punctuation. "A life," I said. She set her glass down and smiled. "A real one. Not the isolated existence in that villa, and not the family you tried to force into being. This is organic. People who want to be here because they choose to be." Sitting there in the cooling evening with a friend who asked for nothing but my company, something unclenched inside me. This was my family now. Chosen, not inherited. Founded on mutual respect and small, steady acts of care rather than obligation or financial incentive. For 40 years, I'd optimized supply chains, moving resources from point A to point B with ruthless efficiency. Now I did the same with time and money instead of cargo, directing help where it would actually do the most good. "Logistics of generosity," Diane said, and we both laughed softly. We watched stars come out one by one over the garden. Somewhere in the dark, Lula was driving back to Tallahassee, back to her minimum wage job and mounting bills, back to consequences she'd created. I felt no triumph in that, no relish. Only a quiet certainty that I'd protected myself and remained true to the values I'd lived by. I'd set boundaries without closing off my capacity to love, even if that love would now be held at a safe distance. Diane gathered the dishes and promised she'd come by the same time next week. When she left, I sat on the patio for a long while. The townhouse lights behind me glowed warm. This place was built for one but open to many. Peace felt different from what I'd imagined. Not a fanfare, but something sustainable. That was enough. Late August arrived with cooler mornings and the hint of autumn. I fell into a rhythm that felt right. Coffee on the patio at sunrise, watching the shared garden rouse itself. Volunteer shifts 3 days a week. Shelter Tuesdays. Veterans Center Thursdays. Literacy Saturdays. Poker with Jerry on Wednesdays. Sunday brunch with Diane at the corner cafe. Simple, purposeful, mine. The townhouse had been made into a home not by heirlooms but by moments. Photographs on the walls of ribbon cuttings and volunteer appreciation days. A candid Diane had taken of me reading to kids at the literacy program. These were my people now. One morning, Marcus called while I was reviewing statements from my financial advisor. The investments were doing what they were supposed to, producing income I could give away. "Final update," Marcus said, brisk and businesslike. "I'm closing your file after this." I told him to go ahead. He didn't hesitate. "They divorced," he said. "Papers filed in Tampa. Irreconcilable differences. Lula moved in with her mother in Savannah, Georgia. Niels vanished. Maybe California, maybe Nevada. Using different names according to my contacts. Looks like they're done." I absorbed the facts and felt nothing dramatic. No victory, no glee. Just the plain acknowledgement of what was. "Appreciate you keeping me informed," I said. "One more thing," Marcus added, shuffling papers. "A letter arrived today at my office, from Lula. Postmarked Savannah. Want me to open it?" My fingers tightened around the phone. "Send it," I said. "I'll decide whether to read it." He agreed and promised it would be mailed that day. 2 days later, a plain manila envelope appeared from Marcus's office. Inside, another envelope, my daughter's handwriting, neater than I remembered, each letter carefully formed, like something drafted and redrafted until it looked right. I sat on the patio with the envelope in my lap and didn't open it. Sunlight freckled the table through the oak's leaves. Birds argued in the hedges. Mrs. Chen tucked mums into the community beds. Normal things went on around me, steady and indifferent to the ripples of my life. Diane was due in an hour. We were to visit the new community center, the Bailey Opportunity Center, a project partly funded by my donation. Community leaders, veterans advocates, and the council member who'd championed the project were expected. I still bristled a little at the idea of my name on a building, but they'd insisted. It wasn't about me, I kept telling myself. It was about the people who would use the space. I folded the envelope back into its manila sheath and slid it into my pocket. The garden smelled faintly of basil and earth, and for once the future looked like something I could manage. Not perfect, not free of pain, but honest and built one deliberate day at a time. She slid the flap open and drew out 3 pages of neat lined handwriting. Line after line, she confessed. No excuses, no theatrical flourish, just dense, careful sentences. "Dad," she wrote, "I won't ask you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. You were right about boundaries, about protecting yourself. I came to your townhouse looking for an opening, not reconciliation. Even then, I was calculating pathways back to money. You saw it, as you always do." She told me the marriage had ended, finalized just last week, that they'd enabled each other's worst impulses until it poisoned them both. She'd moved in with her mother in Savannah and taken a quiet bookstore job. The work was small and steady. It gave her time to think. She was paying down the debt slowly. At this rate, she estimated it would take about 12 years to clear everything. "I created this mess," she wrote. "I should pay for it myself." She admitted what I'd suspected, the pattern of behavior, the manipulations, the timing. "You loved me," she said. "You always did. But I destroyed trust by calling you worthless and walking away, by returning only when you had money, and by suing when manipulation failed. I don't expect anything. Not money. Not reconciliation. Not even an answer. I only wanted to acknowledge the truth." She agreed with the $1 bequest. "It proves you thought of me," she wrote. "Not being forgotten is something," she added with an honesty that hurt. She promised not to contact me again. She said she wanted me to have peace, that I'd earned it by protecting myself, by building something meaningful with what I had. The last lines were simple. "I hope the charities do well. I hope you're happy, Dad. I'm sorry. I read it 3 times, letting each sentence land. Then I folded the letter and slid it into the desk drawer, an acknowledgement preserved but not answered. Some doors remain closed for reasons that outlive regret." 3 days later, the Bailey Opportunity Center dedication went ahead in bright mid-morning sun. The new building gleamed. Classrooms for job training, counseling rooms, a small auditorium for workshops. Over 100 people stood in the courtyard, veterans I'd met while volunteering, community leaders, donors. Diane was at my side as speakers described the programs: job placement, counseling, skills training, scholarships. The ribbon felt surreal in my hands. The oversized scissors were heavier than they looked. Cameras clicked and a plaque was revealed. Bailey Opportunity Center, dedicated to service and second chances. After the formalities, a young veteran approached me. He was 26, a Marine Corps tattoo looping his forearm, eyes bright with gratitude. He gripped my hand and said plainly, "Sir, this place gave me a path when I had none. I served 8 years and came home lost. This program gave me direction. I start college next month on the Bailey Veteran Scholarship. Criminal justice. I want to help other veterans navigate the system." "You earned it through your service," I told him. "I just moved the money." He shook his head. "You did the hard part," he said. "You showed up, you cared." His conviction landed with me, true and clean. I'd shuffled funds, yes, but what mattered was where they landed. People rebuilding their lives, finding work, finding purpose. That was the point of logistics at the end of my life, directing resources where they mattered most. "You're building something?" Diane asked, tilting her wine glass like a question mark. "A life," I said. She smiled. "A real one. Not the lonely existence at the villa, and not the family you tried to force into being. This is organic. People who choose to be here." Sitting there as the evening cooled, with a friend who wanted nothing from me but company, something inside me unclenched. This was my family now. Chosen, not inherited. founded on small, steady acts of care instead of obligation or financial promise. For 40 years, I'd optimized supply chains, moving goods from point A to point B with ruthless efficiency. Now, I did the same with time and money, directing resources where they would do the most good. Logistics of generosity, Diane said, and we both laughed softly. Stars winked into being above the garden. Somewhere on the highway, Lula was heading back to Tallahassee, to the bookstore shift, to mounting bills, to consequences she'd created. I felt no triumph in that, no relish in her hardship, just the quiet certainty that I'd protected myself while staying true to my principles. I set boundaries, but I hadn't closed my heart. Diane cleared the plates and promised to come by next week. When she left, I stayed on the patio, the townhouse lights warm behind me. This place was made for one but open to many. Peace felt different than I'd imagined. Less a victory parade than a sustainable quiet. It was enough. Late August mornings cooled and a steady routine settled in. Coffee at sunrise on the patio, volunteers shifts 3 days a week, shelter Tuesdays, Veterans Center Thursdays, literacy Saturdays, poker with Jerry on Wednesdays, Sunday brunch with Diane. Simple, purposeful rhythms. I'd hung photographs not of birth certificates or diplomas, but of moments. The ribbon cutting at the Veterans Center, a volunteer appreciation group at the shelter, Diane's candid of me reading to children. These were my people. One morning, Marcus called while I was reviewing statements with my financial advisor. The investments were doing what I'd hoped, producing income to give away. Final update, Marcus said, efficient to the end. I'm closing your file after this. Go ahead, I told him. They divorced, he said. Papers filed in Tampa. Irreconcilable differences. Lula moved in with her mother in Savannah. Niels vanished, maybe California, maybe Nevada. Using other names according to my contacts. Looks like they're done. I absorbed the fact without fireworks. No triumph, no glee, just facts acknowledged. Appreciate the update, I said. One more thing, Marcus added, rustling papers. A letter arrived for you at my office. Postmark Savannah. From Lula. Want me to open it? My fingers tightened on the phone. Send it, I said. I'll decide whether to read it. 2 days later, a plain manila envelope from Marcus arrived. Inside, another envelope in Lula's hand, neater than I remembered, each letter carefully formed like someone who'd drafted it more than once. I sat on the patio with it, not opening. Sunlight freckled the table through oak leaves. Mrs. Chen planted mums near the path. Birds argued in the hedges. Normal life hummed on. Diane was due any minute. We were to visit the new community building, the Harrison Opportunity Center, a project my donation had helped fund. I still bristled at my name on the plaque, but it was never about me. It was about the people who would use the space. Finally, I slid my finger under the flap and opened the letter. 3 pages of handwriting, close, deliberate. Dad, she began, I won't ask you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. You were right about protecting yourself. I came to your townhouse looking for an opening, not reconciliation. Even then, part of me was calculating how to get back to the money. You saw through it. You always did. She wrote that the divorce had finally finished last week, that they'd poisoned each other's worst tendencies and it should have ended years ago. She'd moved in with her mother in Savannah and taken a bookstore job. Quiet work that gave her time to think. She was paying down debt slowly. At her pace, it would take about a dozen years to clear everything. I created this mess, she wrote. I should fix it. She admitted the pattern outright, calling me worthless, walking away, returning only when money appeared, suing me when manipulation failed. She said she understood the difference I'd drawn between love and trust. Love, she wrote, is what I'd given her as a child. Bedtime stories, help with homework, the college fund I'd started before she rejected my help. Trust was what she had shattered repeatedly. She agreed the $1 bequest proved she wasn't forgotten. That small, deliberate gesture meant I had considered her, weighed the options, and chosen deliberately. There was respect in that, she wrote, even if it wounded. She promised not to contact me again. She asked for nothing. Not money, not reconciliation, not a reply, only to acknowledge the truth, to accept the consequences she'd brought on herself. She closed with simple lines. "I hope the charities do well. I hope you are happy. I'm sorry, I read it 3 times, folded it carefully, and slipped it into the desk drawer, an acknowledgement preserved but unanswered. Some doors stay closed for good reason, but the letter deserved preservation. Late growth, an admission of harm, an acceptance of consequences." 3 days later, the Harrison Opportunity Center dedication took place in bright mid-morning sun. The building shone. Classrooms, counseling offices, a small auditorium. Over 100 people gathered. Veterans I'd met, community leaders, donors. Diane stood beside me while speakers described job placement, counseling, skills training, and scholarships. My hands felt heavy on the oversized scissors as I cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed. A plaque read, "Harrison Opportunity Center, dedicated to service and second chances." After the ceremony, a young veteran approached, 26, a Marine Corps tattoo along his forearm, eyes steady. "Sir, this program gave me direction," he told me. "I served 8 years and came home lost. I start college next month on the Harrison Veteran Scholarship, Criminal Justice. I want to help other veterans navigate the system." "You earned it through your service," I said. "I just moved the money." "No," he insisted. "You did the hard part. You cared." His conviction landed on me the way truth does, clean and unavoidable. The money was a tool. What mattered was where it landed. People rebuilding, finding purpose, gaining skills. That was the point of logistics at the end of my life, to route resources to where they would matter most. Stories multiplied in the weeks that followed. 50 veterans received scholarship support. 200 animals found permanent homes after shelter upgrades, medical care improvements, and behavior programs. Elderly neighbors accessed meal delivery, transportation, and social programs that kept them connected. The literacy program expanded into 3 more schools. The food bank bought a refrigerated truck and tripled its capacity. A youth mentorship program hired 2 full-time coordinators to guide at-risk teens toward graduation. My lottery ticket, that random purchase at a gas station, was rippling out in ways that would outlast me. A legacy of purpose rather than a lineage of names. One late August evening, Diane and I sat on the patio with wine and cheese, turning our weekly dinner into a small celebration of ordinary things. The sky shifting from orange to violet, the garden preparing for autumn. I told her again the truth I'd learned. Money doesn't create character. It amplifies what's already there. The lottery revealed who people were. It gave me the means to create purpose. It allowed me to choose family based on mutual respect rather than obligation. She squeezed my hand. "You're doing exactly what you should," she said. I set down my glass. "For 40 years I moved cargo," I said. "I'm still moving things, only now the cargo is time and resources. I route them to where they'll be used well." "Logistics of generosity," she echoed, smiling. Maybe I'd finally internalized it. Or maybe I was simply learning to live with peace instead of always bracing for the next crisis. Outside, people harvested late tomatoes in the community beds, and children chased each other between the planted paths. Lula was in Savannah, working and paying consequences. Neil was somewhere under another name. Their lives had diverged from mine, and the separation, once a personal failure I carried, now felt like wisdom. Some relationships are toxic no matter the love involved. Boundaries are sometimes the only survival. I felt no triumph in their hardships, only acceptance that protection has a price. The moon rose nearly full over the garden. I finished my cold coffee, stretched, and planned the week. Shelter on Tuesday, poker with Jerry on Wednesday, Veterans Center. Thursday, reading with the kids on Saturday. Chosen obligations. Purposeful days. I'd won the lottery and lost a daughter. I had gained millions and lost a family by blood. But I had found something else. A community, a purpose, a quieter peace. Not triumphant vindication, just a sustainable life where I woke without dread and slept without regret. The letter from Lula remained in my desk drawer, an apology without expectation of reply. I wouldn't answer it, but I wouldn't discard it either. It was evidence of growth, however late. The night deepened. Stars climbed into the sky as I stood and walked inside, ready for another day of the work I'd chosen. If you liked this story, please like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Click the box on the left to listen to the next story. Thank you for watching,